The next page in our taco manual focuses on one of my favorites when I lived in Mexico City, and that's chicken tacos with red mole. Now, I think probably everybody would expect me to just buy one of those mole pastes that you can get in any Mexican grocery store, dilute it down with some chicken stock and mix it with some chicken and say we've got chicken tacos in mole. But that's not what I'm going to do because I haven't found one of those mole pastes that I really love. So instead, I decided to take the essence of mole, incorporate a piece of kitchen equipment that I use a fair amount, which is my slow cooker, and see if I could hit that real true flavor of mole, and I did it. So I'm going to show you how to make this mole in the fastest version that I've ever worked with at all, using our slow cooker. Okay, so we're going to start with the chilies that go into mole. I wish I could tell you could just use one dried chili, but when I tried it with that, the flavor wasn't complex enough. This needs the 3 classic chilies that go into a mole poblano, red mole, central Mexico. So we have a chile mulato, looks just like the chile ancho, but it's darker. We're going to start with 6 of those. We have 3 of these ancho chiles, which are a more cranberry red. Maybe you can see that there. And then we've got 4 of these pasilla chilies, the long, very, very dark ones. Of course, what you have to do is to pull out the stems. I wish there was an easy way to do this, or you could buy these guys already stemmed and seeded, but you will have to go through this part of it, but it's what's going to make this taste like somebody's grandma's homemade mole. Okay, so you just get all of the seeds out of there, stem off, then tear it into smaller pieces, about 1 inch. You might want to use a pair of scissors for this, and I've got all of these guys right here. We're going to do a frying, toasting of the chilies, and a lot of other stuff that's going to go in here, and you have to choose the fat that you're going to do it in. Most of you will probably reach for a jar of vegetable oil for this. If you want the really true flavor of Mexico, then a beautiful fresh rendered pork lard would be the thing to work with. You can find that at the meat market in your Mexican grocery store, or at a butcher's. Don't buy the prepackaged stuff. Get it from a good source if you're going to use the lard. All of those chilies prepped are going to go in here. And we're going to add to that about 3/4 cup of almonds. They can be skin on or skin off. Most people in Mexico would do it with skin on. About 1/2 cup of raisins and 4 whole large garlic cloves. All of that just goes in here. And we will start the sauteing now. I had been heating this for a little while so that lard would melt fast, and then it'll take about 5 minutes of standing here stirring it. So this is sort of getting the ingredients together. It's sort of the hardest part of this if you want to know the truth. And standing here for 5 minutes really is a lot less work than if you were to make the classic mole poblano, which would probably take you 5 or 6 hours. I've got this down to less than an hour of actual time that I am engaged in the preparation of the mole. Just take a look at this and you can see that the edges of the chilies have a little toast on them. A lot of them have lightened up in color. That's exactly what we're looking for. I never really stopped stirring this at all because the chilies can burn, and I'm working over a sort of medium-high fire. Next step here is going to be to put a can of fire-roasted tomatoes, one of those about 15-ounce cans in there. Stir it in really well, and then we have to reduce all the juice in that. So it'll take a minute or so, and while it's doing its thing here, I'm going to come over here to this little molcajete, this little mortar here, and I'm going to grind up the spices. I like fresh ground. You can use already ground spices if you would like. What I didn't put in here is anise seeds. You can go for 1/4 to a teaspoon, a 1/4 to a 1/2 teaspoon of anise seeds, depending on how much you like that flavor. I also have a 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper, what will give me about a 1/2 teaspoon of ground cinnamon here. but I'm going to have to work on that back and forth until I get it ground up. I also have some cloves in there. What would be about 1/8 of a teaspoon of cloves that are going to be in here. Then just crush that. I'm a very active cook, so I don't mind doing this kind of stuff, but it does take a fair amount of elbow grease, as we called it when I was growing up, to get this to grind into a really smooth powder. Okay, you could break a sweat doing this kind of grinding, but I think I'm going to stop right there. You can still see tiny little flecks of the cinnamon, the Mexican canela. I'm going to put that in here. I can see now that we have reduced all of the juices in the tomatoes. So I'm going to put in the last few ingredients that are going to go in here. A couple cups of water. Some of you may be surprised with that, thinking it would only be chicken stock in here. I like the way the flavors come out better when you're working with water at this stage. You'd like a thick piece of bread. I had a Mexican telera, but a thick piece of bread that darkly toasted, and just break that up in here. And then we have the chocolate that we're going to put in at the same time. So it's just about 1 ounce of chocolate. Chocolate in a classic mole is not the main flavor. In fact, it is really one of the flavors like the cinnamon and black pepper. It's something that enhances everything, doesn't dominate anything. All right, stir that up. We just have some seasonings. I'm going to give a very introductory seasoning level going on in here. I'm going to put 3 tablespoons of sugar in there. That's what brings out the flavor of the chilies. And I'm going to put a couple of teaspoons of salt. We will revisit those seasonings when we get back to the very end of it here, and we have finished mole in the slow cooker. At this point, we are ready to put this onto the slow cooker and set it up for its long, slow simmer. So I'm going to drop this in here. I'm working with a really old crock pot here that has an insert that can be put directly over. I always recommend that you work with that kind of a slow cooker because it gives you so much more flexibility. If yours does not have a stovetop safe insert, I suggest that you do all of this in a large skillet and scrape it into your slow cooker. Top goes on, and now we're going to set the time and temperature. I'm going to turn it on to low, and then I'm going to set the time for 6 hours, and we'll let that cook, and I'll show you what that looks like in 6 hours. Okay, I don't know if you want to post this picture on your Instagram or not, but that's what it looks like when it has been doing its thing for 6 hours there. I'm going to take this out because our next step is to do the blending, and we want to go right back into this crock for the final simmering. So I'm going to take all of this out. You'll notice that almost all the liquid has now reduced. So we'll put this mixture in. Literally, it doesn't look like it's going to be a good dish, but wait till you taste it. It is super delicious and tasty. And because of this long, slow simmering, all of those flavors will come together in a great way, and it'll really taste like mole. Okay, last little bit here with my towel. I'm just going to scrape this stuff into this bowl. Now I'm going to put this insert to the crock pot back here so that we can go right back into it. But I am going to now blend in 2 batches here. This mixture, this cooked down mole, what I would call a mole base, with each of these batches that I'm blending being having about 1.5 cups of broth. What we're trying to do is just to facilitate all of this blending. Put the top of it on, and we're going to let this run until it's completely smooth. Okay, let's see what this looks like now. It should be quite smooth. If your blender ever stalls, then just add a little bit more of the chicken broth to it. And then we'll just pour this in here. You see how smooth and beautiful? It's like velvety in texture. So we'll put that in here and then go back with the second batch and another 1.5 cups or so of chicken stock. I got 6 cups all together. That's what's going to go in here eventually anyway. So pour that much in there and go for another round of blending. Okay, I think we're another smooth batch here. So I'll pour that in to the slow cooker. You'll see that this makes a lot of, this is the smallest amount you could make in a slow cooker, but it makes a lot of mole, which is really great for you because you can quickly make this mole, quick in terms of mole making, and then you have some that you can put in the freezer for another time. I'm going to put the rest of our 6 cups total of the chicken broth in here. And now we are ready to set this on high, and I'm going to put it on for 2 hours right there. We'll come back and see what this looks like at the end of this final simmering time. Final step here. We've gotten this simmered now for a couple of hours. Obviously, we got to taste it. This makes about 10 cups total of mole. Okay. It's a little under seasoned. I'm going to say about a tablespoon more of sugar. This is the hardest part for a lot of people who haven't made mole before because sugar is an essential element in this. If you don't put enough sugar in it, then the flavor of the chiles will not come forward. And about a teaspoon or so of salt. I'm going to just stir that in and then give it another taste to see where we are seasoning wise. After you've made a lot of mole, you'll have a good sense of where you're going seasoning wise. Okay, now it's working. For these little chicken tacos, after you've spent all that time and energy in that mole, I suggest that you just buy like a rotisserie chicken, but you may have other ideas for the chicken part of this. And this was just like a 2.5 pound rotisserie chicken. Pulled all the skin off and the meat off of the bones and tore it into coarse shreds here. I'm going to take about a couple of cups of this mole and just splash that all over this chicken. This is the way this is typically served, not with the mole on the top, but actually with the mole mixed in to the chicken meat, the coarse shreds of the chicken. I'm going to use a pair of tongs here to get that mixed nicely. So look in there and you'll see kind of what I'm looking for. A nice coating of mole on here. I've got some warm tortillas for these oh so classic flavored tacos here. So we'll put a couple of those guys down. Some of the chicken. If you want, you could splash a little bit more of the mole over the top. That's just about a nice look for me. Take a little bit more of the mole that's in there. This really gets me excited because this flavor is unlike any other flavor in the whole wide world. This is the crown jewel of the Mexican kitchen. And there you've got classic chicken tacos with red mole that you made yourself from scratch, but with not too much effort. Okay, the tacos were a success. Everybody's happy and you're staring at 8 cups more of this mole in front of you. So what do you do with it? Well, first of all, you need to know your options of how you can use it. Mole on enchiladas is one of my absolute favorite dishes, or during the warm weather months if you're going to be doing some grilling, grilled chicken breasts or grilled shrimp even with this mole is really spectacular. I suggest that you break it down into 2-cup increments so that you can defrost a little or a lot, depending on what your needs are. I love these pint containers like this. I use masking tape on the top of it, write red mole, the date, so that I don't lose track of when I made it. Put these into the freezer. I always recommend that you do the defrosting in the refrigerator overnight. That will be a nice long slow defrost. But if you open the top of it and it looks a little what I would call broken, it doesn't look smooth and velvety like it does right here, just know that a quick spin through the blender and it'll all come right back together, and you can have a treasure in your freezer that you will be very happy to have.